Hi, welcome to Wetpixel Live. My name's Adam Hanlon. I'm the publisher of Wetpixel, and I'm joined today by Alex Mustard.
Hi Adam, it's great to be here.
Hi Alex, good to see you. So today we plan to discuss a couple of topics, or a few topics about setting out in underwater photography. And namely, we thought we'd choose our five most important or five top tips that we use for underwater photographers. So without going on, Alex, what's your most important tip for new underwater photographers?
Well, I've sort of tried to pull these together based on people who are starting out in underwater photography. Generally, I think during these discussions, we'll probably try and get into the meaty issues of underwater photography. But today, it's good to do one for people starting out. And the most important thing when you're starting out in underwater photography is to get those diving skills really nailed. For me, that's not about how many certification cards you've got. It's really about those in-water skills. Now, obviously, the more you educate yourself, the more likely your in-water skills are good. But actually, it's that diving time that really makes a difference. That real control of yourself in the water that transforms how capable you are as an underwater photographer. Being stable in the water helps you with everything in underwater photography. It helps you maneuvering close to animals. The more stable the camera is, the easier it is for you to precisely frame a subject and to focus on it. A camera will struggle to autofocus if it's always moving about.
Yeah.
I also think it's important, when you're close to delicate marine life, to have that real control over your position in the water, because obviously you don't want to be damaging things when you're shooting. So getting those diving skills nailed is absolutely essential.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And time in the water is something you mentioned, because there's so much going on underwater, and when we're new to diving, the focus inevitably is on diving and being underwater and the things we need to do to keep ourselves safe and comfortable underwater. And in order to achieve photography, really, we need to be able to remove that focus and be able to be automatic in our diving skills, and hence just relax and be able to then be in a position to get pictures. So I think time in the water and experience is a really important part of this.
Yeah, and especially because a camera can be a really big distraction underwater.
Yeah.
And so if you're relatively incompetent with your diving skills, and then you add a camera into it, it's not just dangerous for the marine life you might damage, it's also dangerous for yourself and other people, because if you're not paying attention to all the life support stuff going on, it's not going to work out well. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you about, Adam, is we both dive slightly differently. You're a very correct diver, very horizontal in the water. You've got fantastic trim, fantastic buoyancy. I tend to dive a little bit more on that kind of 45-degree angle, not so horizontal in the water, because I find it more comfortable holding the camera. What are kind of your thoughts on that? I find the way you dive is more correct, but not as comfortable with the camera.
I think the 45-degree viewfinder really helps with my body position in the water. I tend to be very flat in the water, and that comes from a lot of technical diving background. And I think it both work. I think the single most important skill I've developed over the years is being able to swim backwards, which allows me to get really precise in position. And you can only really do that when you're really flat in the water. You can't do it when you're vertical, when you're off vertical. And that allows me to get in tight to stuff and then back away from it. And I think that's a really useful skill to be able to do. But I would say that generally, those types of skills, these are the types of skills that you can practice without a camera in your hand. So that they are quite a useful skill on any diving trip. You can just practice things like precision positioning in the water and so on and so forth. I think sometimes though your position in the water, the slightly less horizontal position, actually lends itself to creating better images, because I think you actually have a better worldview. My neck is tilted right back, and so that's harder for me in some ways to actually picture or to frame pictures in my head. I think possibly you see things in a different way, in a more natural way, probably, and I think that's probably a good thing. So there are pros and cons to both approaches. So.
It's really interesting. I think one thing I would say on that is actually one of the guys I dive with quite regularly, Byron Conway from Iceland. He's like you, a very well trained technical diver, fantastic trim, really got control of his body. And one thing I noticed with him is when we're shooting inside wrecks, he can do amazingly long exposures handheld and get fantastically sharp images from them. And I've seen him sort of unlock angles on wrecks where no one else can get that angle, because he's just so stable in the water. He can risk these really long exposures and creates really interesting images. Right, I suppose I should get on to tip number 2.
Yeah, what's the second one?
Is that absolute fundamental of underwater photography is get close, get closer. You know, one of the sort of cliches of underwater photography is underwater photography would be easy if it wasn't for the water. And the best way to get rid of the water is to get as close as possible to your subject. And I think when people are starting out in underwater photography, they don't realize how close it is. And I think the one rule I always keep in my mind when telling people is a long way away in underwater photography means the subject is too far away to touch, and only just too far away to touch. You know, my webcam is a long way away in underwater photography terms. Most things that you're photographing in underwater photography, you should be in touching range. You shouldn't be touching them, but they should be in touching range, and that will transform your pictures.
I think one of the, again, a common question for people, often when we're talking about gear, is they say, well, how do you zoom in? How do you create? And essentially, the zoom button on your compact camera or the zoom gear on your SLR or mirrorless camera, we use those to control the way we frame the image, not to get closer. So there's nothing wrong with zooming in as long as you're close already. But the zoom button, unlike on land where we can use a telephoto effect and we can zoom in on a creature that's too far away, we can't do that. We need to use, and again, it ties neatly back into point one, in that if you've got really good buoyancy control and you can get really close, that allows you, then you don't need to zoom in because you can literally swim in and control your position. So and everything's a cycle, and they both tie into the same place. But certainly, removing the water is definitely the one of the single most important things you can do. Yeah, quite agree.
Well, going on for that, I think my tip number 3 is all about lenses, and we talking about zoom lenses brought that up. But actually, the thing that will really transform your underwater camera system is using the right accessories on it, and lenses are absolutely critical. You know, there's 2 lenses that underwater photography is divided into, really. If you look at any photographic competition, the 2 big categories that they have are wide angle and macro, and there's the clue. The 2 lenses you need for underwater photography is a close focusing wide angle lens and a macro lens. Because both of those allow you to take those shots from very close to the subject, one capturing all its small detail and one capturing that bigger scene.
Yeah, the other issue on lens choice, and possibly this is more we're talking about interchangeable lens choice, is compatibility as well. So it's important to stress that not all lenses work well underwater. Even sometimes some very good, very expensive lenses don't work terribly well underwater. And ironically, some relatively inexpensive, not so good lenses work really well underwater. So really, this is a point where you really want to start talking to other divers, talking to other photographers, possibly actually not talking to divers, talking to other photographers, and interacting with people and trying to get some advice on what the right choices are. But certainly, and for those,
you're stealing all my future points here.
Oops, sorry. One of those things about compact camera use is there's a whole ecosystem now of accessory lenses that can be attached to compact cameras that do a great job actually of allowing you to adapt your compact camera for optimum use underwater, and this is well worth investigating. So this is not limited to those people who want to go out and spend a lot of money on an SLR camera or a mirrorless camera. This compact camera, and there's a whole bunch of really good accessory lenses that you can tie to it, and they make a huge difference to your photography.
Yeah, absolutely. But they fall into those 2 categories of wide angle.
Yeah.
And then the other absolute sort of transformative piece of equipment, so tip number 4, is get your lighting sorted. And the lighting to go for 9 times out of 10 is flash. The downside of using continuous light, although LED torches are incredibly powerful these days and relatively small, is they don't give you the independent control of your lighting that flash guns give you. The flash guns were invented for a reason, and that fast pulse of light allows you both to control the balance of light between your foreground and background, and it also helps freeze the subject and opens up creative possibilities as well. But the reason flash is so important underwater is, as any diver will tell you, is as soon as you go down away from the surface, the bright white light, all the colors of the rainbow, quickly get absorbed, and you end up in a monochromatic blue world, very, very shallow, in very shallow water very quickly. And as a result, you need that flash underwater to restore those colors. So 99% of underwater pictures that you see are taken with flash. And I think that's really important. So if you're planning to invest, the first thing I would get with any system is to get that wide angle lens to really open up your capabilities. You can do quite a lot of nice available light wide angle photography, but relatively soon you want to be adding flashes to that system. Most underwater photographers end up buying 2 flash guns, but when you're starting out, that can be quite expensive. So I would suggest starting out by buying one good one, with the intention of getting another good one to add to it. Don't buy one. Don't go for a cheap, crappy pair. Sorry about the language there, but don't go for a cheaper pair, because ultimately you end up wanting to replace both of them. Buy one good one, learn to shoot with one flash gun with the intention of adding a second one if you find you really get into underwater photography.
And I think this is something that, again, most underwater photographers end up buying the latest gear, or maybe not the latest gear, but renewing their gear fairly regularly, new cameras, so on and so forth. So that's part of the fun and the expense of underwater photography. Whereas your flash guns will probably last through several generations of camera. So people tend to possibly sometimes spend more on a camera and less on a flash gun. In actual fact, probably there's a strong argument to suggest you want to go the other way around, because the flash gun will outlast several iterations of camera.
Yeah, and you only have to look at the word photography to know what's the important thing in photography. It's the photo bit, and that's light. So yeah, absolutely. Right, yeah. I'll get on to the final point, and that is, for me, the other really big tip, and this definitely made a huge difference in my career, is to start diving with other photographers. You learn so much from diving with other photographers, just from osmosis of just seeing how they operate, seeing how they prepare their gear, how they approach their diving. But also just turning your whole diving attitude into getting pictures is transformative to the quality of work you produce. If you just go on a normal scuba dive and take some pictures, you'll have some nice snaps. As soon as you start diving for images, your work will be transformed. And it's the most important thing. And when you start diving with photographers, you'll start diving in a way that you choose dive sites that way, you plan dive profiles that way, you repeat dive sites. All those things are actually the key to really strong images.
Yeah, and and the other thing you get, I mean, generally, it's not universal, but generally underwater photographers are a fairly kind of sociable lot, and there's nothing they like more than a conversation about a particular image or how they capture an image. Look at us, yeah, and so on and so forth, yeah, and the Alex and I never have a conversation that's less than 25 minutes long. It's impossible. No. It's against the laws of the physics. But this is because we're excited about it, and you learn so much from these conversations. So hanging out, diving for photographs rather than diving for diving's sake. All of these things make a huge difference to the quality of the images you capture, and I can't overrate it enough. I think it's probably one of the most important things. Really, it also helps to inspire you, because along the way everyone has challenges, and the image is not working out the way they want, and being able to bounce ideas off a third party and explain why it's not working, and they can give you input into it, is a really important tool. We spoke right at the beginning about coaching and training and so on and so forth. I think this informal thing where you sit down with a bunch of people and discuss what you want to get in an image, and they figure out between you how to get it. That's a really, really good way of getting things going, and helping to improve your imagery. So, yeah.
Okay, well, that's pretty much it from me. I'll just recap those. I think my 5 big tips are: get those diving skills absolutely nailed, get close to your subjects and then get closer, choose the right lenses, those wide angle and macro lenses for your system that will really transform your camera. They're far more important than the camera they're in front of. Yeah. Get your lighting right, particularly flashes. Yeah. And then finally, dive with other photographers. So I think those for me are my big 5 when starting out. And actually, at whatever level you're at in underwater photography, you want to make sure that you're doing those 5.
Yeah, I think that's really great, and thanks for summarising that, Alex. So I'm just going to come back to the starting point again, and just to thank Alex very much, and to say that I'd like to thank our sponsors. So our sponsor today is Cape May Diving Centre, which is my home diving centre, and is very kindly sponsored this episode. We've got a comment section below this. Please feel free to ask questions, add comments, tell us what you think about it.
Suggest future topics.
Suggest future topics, indeed. Yeah, Alex in the background, and we'll catch you all again soon.